and what my experience was like. But with that being said, we have been posting a lot of clips from the interviews that I did with these players on social media. So if you're not following the Courtside Club Instagram account or Courtside Club Twitter, or SiriusXM also on those platforms. We've also been collaborating on YouTube with SiriusXM where some of those interviews have been posted. So make sure that you guys tune into social media to see some of those clips. We are planning on possibly uploading the interviews more in their entirety in a longer form episode, but that's going to take us a few days to just like go through all the footage and get all of that together. But in the meantime, everything will be posted on.
Something major just unfolded in Indianapolis, and if you're a fan of the Indiana Fever, you're going to want every detail because the front office has been operating at full speed, moving quickly, no, rapidly, locking in a wave of signings that have already reshaped the outlook of the 2026 WNBA season before it's even tipped off. This isn't speculation or rumor. This is official. The GM has confirmed it, and what's being built around Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston right now could become the most dangerous roster this franchise has ever assembled. But before diving into those headline moves, you need to understand how close Indiana came to everything unraveling last season, because that context makes what's happening now even more remarkable. Think back to the 2025 WNBA season, when Clark, the most talked about player in women's basketball, appeared in just 13 games due to a groin injury that completely disrupted what was expected to be a breakout championship push. Only 13. And the entire city of Indianapolis was holding its breath. Every analyst, every commentator, every voice around the game was watching closely and saying the same thing. Everyone said the same thing. The Indiana Fever were finished. Count them out. Season over. But what actually happened told a completely different story. The remaining players, running purely on effort, resilience, and belief, somehow battled their way into the playoffs, took down the Atlanta Dream in the opening round, and then pushed the defending champions, the Las Vegas Aces, all the way to a decisive Game 5 in the semifinals, a winner-take-all showdown that ultimately ended in an overtime loss, 107-102. But the message Indiana sent across the league was unmistakable. Even shorthanded, even imperfect, this team was dangerous. So imagine what they could become at full strength. That improbable postseason run didn't just build momentum, it gave the front office a clear directive, with GM Amber Cox leading the charge. The mission entering the offseason wasn't to simply rebuild, it was to reload and elevate, and the first major piece to fall into place was also the most important: Kelsey Mitchell, a three-time All-Star and All-WNBA level talent, setting the tone for everything that followed.
Social media. Also, my TikTok, I was able to talk to so many of the draftees after they were drafted. So I actually want to go through this list and talk about the picks. So obviously, number one in the WNBA draft was AZ Fudd. Now, we weren't unfortunately able to talk to AZ. She had a very strict schedule and she was only going to certain places on her media tour. Obviously, being the number one pick, there are a lot of people who wanted to speak to AZ, but we were actually able to talk to the Dallas Wings CEO. And the first question I wanted to ask him, and I'm so glad that I was able.
A player who averaged a franchise record 20.2 points per game in 2025 while Caitlin Clark was sidelined in street clothes. She became the driving force that kept the Indiana Fever alive through that stretch, and the organization made it clear to the entire league she wasn't going anywhere. The team placed a core qualifying offer on Kelsey Mitchell, a designation reserved for the most vital piece of a franchise. And the moment the signing window opened on April 11th, the deal was already finalized, locked in on a one-year Supermax contract worth $1.4 million, making her the highest-paid player in franchise history. And to put that into perspective, under the new WNBA collective bargaining agreement, the salary cap rose to $7 million, with the Supermax set at 20% of that total, meaning Mitchell secured every dollar available at that level. When GM Amber Cox announced the signing, she made it clear there was no debate. Mitchell had been a cornerstone of the franchise for years, and bringing her back was the top priority. And if there was any doubt about that, Clark had already said it publicly on national television during an NBC NBA broadcast, making it known that re-signing Mitchell wasn't just a priority, it was the priority, the kind of alignment that championship teams are built on. But Indiana wasn't finished yet, because before the ink on Mitchell's contract had even fully dried, the next major move was already falling into place.
the FIBA World Cup qualifiers and playing against Team USA and what players she's excited to go up against. She was also very sweet, but she also made it so clear to me. Awa is a winner. She's a winner. She wants to win. She wants to go out there and compete, and she's ready to do that. So I do think that that's a solid pick for number 3. Guys, number 4, Lauren Betts going to the Washington Mystics. I actually predicted this in my mock draft. So in my mock draft, I had AZ 1, Awa 2, Olivia Miles 3 to the Storm. But this was also before free agency when everything started moving around. But I did have Lauren Betts going to the Mystics.
Calling out to Sophie Cunningham on social media, Caitlin Clark isn't just the face of this franchise anymore. She may actually be influencing the direction of it. And that level of commitment from your best player is exactly how dynasties begin to form. While the Clark-Cunningham situation keeps fans guessing, the Indiana Fever front office didn't sit still. They moved quickly to address one of their biggest needs by adding frontcourt depth, bringing in Monique Billings, an 8-year WNBA veteran originally drafted 15th overall in 2018 by the Atlanta Dream, becoming the first unrestricted free agent to sign with Indiana this offseason. Billings spent last season with the Golden State Valkyries after being selected in the expansion draft, where she appeared in 26 games, averaged 7.3 points and 4.5 rebounds, and shot nearly 48% from the field, giving Indiana a versatile presence who can play power forward or shift to center, something head coach Stephanie White didn't consistently have last season. And just as important, she already has chemistry with the roster, having played alongside Kelsey Mitchell during the offseason and unrivaled, which should help her transition seamlessly into this evolving system, playing in that winter league that's become a proving ground for WNBA talent. And then sharing the court with Caitlin Clark during the FIBA qualifying tournament in Puerto Rico earlier in the year, Monique Billings made her decision clear when speaking about why she chose the Indiana Fever, pointing to 3 simple factors: the vision, the culture, and the opportunity, and she openly said she's excited to play alongside Clark, especially with an existing connection already in place through both Clark and Kelsey Mitchell, which should make her transition smooth. And for Aaliyah Boston, this means something even bigger: real experience support in the front court, which was a major issue last season, but now looks solved. Yet even after adding Billings, Indiana wasn't finished, because the question of backcourt depth still lingered: who steps in when Clark rests or if injuries become a factor again, something that plagued the team throughout 2025 with constant roster shuffling and short-term replacements, making consistency nearly impossible. So the Fever went out and found stability in Tyasha Harris, an Indianapolis native returning home after stints with the Dallas Wings and the Connecticut Sun, bringing not only experience but also familiarity with head coach Stephanie White from their time together in Connecticut, which adds an extra layer of trust and fit. Harris is a composed floor general, someone who doesn't need high usage to be effective and has consistently shown she can steady an offense when needed, and with reports confirming her deal through ESPN, Indiana effectively addressed one of its biggest remaining concerns by securing a reliable guard who can keep everything running smoothly behind Clark.
She'll fit very well in the style of play that the Golden State Valkyries play. Like, obviously, we love watching the Valkyries. They're very fun, and they will definitely get better with her on the squad. Okay, and then next up to the Washington Mystics was Angela Dugalich. Now, Angela is joining Lauren Betts at the Washington Mystics. Angela also was probably one of my favorite interviews. I loved chatting with her. She's so personable, so sweet. All of the UCLA girls, just the kind of, honestly, all of the women that I talked to. But Angela, I really, really enjoyed our conversation. There will be more clips of her interview going up on social media over the next couple days and then also later on this week. But that's
when you step back and line it all up piece by piece, the picture in Indianapolis starts to look almost unreal, because the Indiana Fever have quietly built something that feels complete on paper, starting with Caitlin Clark, the league's most electrifying young star, now fully healthy after missing most of 2025, next to Aaliyah Boston, the 2023 Rookie of the Year, who now sits in a new contractual window that allows for a 3-year max extension worth roughly $1.19 million under the updated collective structure. Then you have Kelsey Mitchell, a first-team All-WNBA caliber scorer, franchise record holder, and MVP-level presence locked into her deal, forming the offensive backbone of the team, alongside Lexi Hull, whose defense, energy, and locker room presence add the kind of stability that doesn't show up in salary charts but absolutely shows up in wins. And now the front court is reinforced by Monique Billings, giving Boston the kind of interior support that prevents opposing defenses from collapsing freely in the paint and forces more balanced coverages, while Tyasha Harris provides experienced, trusted depth behind Clark at guard, bringing composure and system familiarity to stabilize rotations, and even young draft talent like Mackenzie Holmes continues developing under a structured rookie-scale contract. Meaning Indiana's core rotation is not just talented, but also largely cost-controlled and locked in, and when you total it all together, the Fever's foundational group already accounts for a significant portion of their roster stability under the salary structure, signaling a franchise that isn't just assembling names, but building continuity, balance, and long-term identity. At roughly $1.4 million in total committed salaries, the Indiana Fever are sitting comfortably well under the $7 million hard cap, leaving them with more than $5.6 million in available flexibility, making them one of the most financially adaptable teams in the entire league. And with the WNBA draft set for April 13th and the number 10 pick in hand, there's still plenty of room for additional moves, with names like Raven Johnson from South Carolina being mentioned as a defensive-minded guard who could slot neatly into their system, alongside Gianna Needkins from UCLA, a shooting specialist who could add yet another layer to Indiana's offensive spacing. Then training camp begins April 19th, and the season officially tips off May 9th against the Dallas Wings. Meaning the window is wide open and the expectations are rising fast. But this is where the conversation gets more complicated, because across the league there's a growing debate that the national media hasn't fully settled on. Some analysts argue the Indiana Fever should continue reshaping the roster instead of running it back, pointing to concerns like whether Aaliyah Boston has enough frontcourt support or whether the team is too guard-heavy to compete with elite contenders, and suggesting Indiana may still need a more traditional second star rather than relying heavily on a scoring guard like Kelsey Mitchell. And while that argument is valid on paper, there's also a strong counterpoint emerging within the league conversation, because despite those questions, Indiana already showed they can reach a high competitive level with this core, suggesting continuity and chemistry might be just as important as another major roster shakeup.
About was going to an organization where they know that they can win, and she wants to contribute with her hard work, her dedication, and her defense. Now, if we look at the Indiana Fever's roster, they are guard heavy. They're also point guard heavy, having Raven Johnson and having Ty Harris into that mix. But we also heard from Coach Stephanie White that she wants to make sure that Kelsey Mitchell can get some breaks, that Caitlin can get some breaks. What I didn't love that Coach Steph White said is, Caitlin can play on and off the ball. I don't want to continue on with that experiment of playing Caitlin Clark off the ball. However, now we have a rotation of
semifinals without Caitlin Clark. Without Clark, and still the Indiana Fever managed to push all the way to the brink of contention. And now if you simply add a fully healthy, fully available Clark back into a group that already reached the semifinals, the ceiling of this roster becomes something the league has to seriously rethink, with teams like the Minnesota Lynx emerging as early favorites, the Las Vegas Aces still standing as reigning champions, and the New York Liberty refusing to fade from contention. Yet Indiana, in current championship projections, is already climbing into that upper tier, and many around the league believe that number is only going to rise, especially after everything that's unfolded recently. But there is still one storyline that keeps getting overlooked in mainstream coverage, and that is the future of Sophie Cunningham, because Clark has publicly signaled interest in her return. Cunningham already has a clear connection with both the fanbase and parts of the roster identity. Yet the financial reality is complicated. With Kelsey Mitchell on a supermax deal and Lexi Hull on a multi-year contract, the cap math becomes tight very quickly. Cunningham remains an unrestricted free agent, meaning she can sign anywhere, and while multiple contenders will absolutely pursue her for her shooting and toughness, Indiana still wants her back. But wanting her and actually fitting her into the structure are two very different things. And if she does return, this roster immediately shifts from dangerous to historically stacked, but if she doesn't, The Fever will have to find that same energy, physicality, and perimeter shooting through other free agent moves or the draft, and that decision point now becomes one of the most important subplots heading into the next phase of this build. Subtle but significant. That's exactly the word for it. Because what Indiana Fever have done this offseason under GM Amber Cox is less about flashy headlines and more about disciplined sequencing, starting with Kelsey Mitchell as the first priority, locking in the scoring cornerstone to signal ambition, then moving to Lexi Hull to preserve the cultural core and locker room identity, followed by the addition of Monique Billings to address a clear structural weakness in the front court before it could be exploited again, and then Tyasha Harris to stabilize depth and solve the very real issues that injuries exposed last season, and step by step, intentionally, without panic or overspending on mismatched talent. This has become a surgical rebuild around a generational centerpiece in Caitlin Clark, and Cox's public framing of the Mitchell signing wasn't just praise, it was a statement of intent. A decade-long acknowledgement that the franchise knows exactly who its foundation is built on and what must be preserved first. And when the general manager, head coach, and franchise star are all aligned on vision, priorities, and culture, what you're looking at stops being just a roster and starts becoming a system, a program with direction and identity, and beyond the basketball itself. The ripple effects are even larger because the rise of Indiana has reshaped the entire WNBA landscape, with Clark's arrival accelerating viewership, driving ticket demand, boosting merchandise sales, and elevating the league's cultural visibility in a way that would have been difficult to imagine just a couple of seasons ago. Next came Lexi Hull, the 26-year-old guard who has grown into one of the most loved figures in Indiana basketball, and her return always felt inevitable, even though she entered free agency as a restricted player, giving the Indiana Fever the right to match any outside offer. There was never real doubt she'd stay. She had already put down roots in Indianapolis, buying a home, launching a new clothing line just days before free agency began, and building a life that clearly extended beyond basketball. So when the window officially opened, she didn't make some quiet or formal announcement. Instead, she confirmed it in a way that perfectly reflected the culture of this team. While spending time in Augusta, Georgia, at the Masters tournament alongside Caitlin Clark, the two were enjoying the weekend like close friends, and Hull posted a TikTok video revealing she was staying. The moment felt natural, genuine, and fun, and it captured exactly the kind of chemistry and connection this roster has built together. 1.8 assists per game last season, with her three-point shooting sitting around 36.7%. But the raw stats don't fully capture what Lexi Hull brings to this team. She's a defensive anchor, a relentless high-energy presence, and a key voice inside the locker room. Starting 30 games while seeing her minutes rise from under 20 per game to nearly 27 in her first full season under head coach Stephanie White, and the Indiana Fever made their stance clear. Hull represents the heart of this organization, and her playoff performance only reinforced that belief. The team valued her, the fans embraced her, and while all of this was unfolding, Caitlin Clark was watching from Augusta and made another move of her own, jumping into the comments of Hull's TikTok and tagging Sophie Cunningham with a simple message, for words that instantly set the WNBA world buzzing. Because anyone familiar with Indiana's culture knows about Tres Leches, the nickname fans gave to the trio of Clark, Hull, and Cunningham, a group known for its chemistry and energy. And with that one comment, Clark made it clear she wants Cunningham back, playful but unmistakable. And what's happening in Indiana right now goes beyond a front office assembling talent. It's a superstar actively influencing the roster around her. Clark reportedly pushed to make re-signing Kelsey Mitchell the top priority. She appeared alongside Hull during that moment, and now she's publicly signaling the next piece she wants to bring into place.